Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This amendment changes language within the definition of the taxpayer resource transaction. Under the current language of Senate Bill 22, women's health providers would not be able to provide services because they would not have any access to state or local revenue, regardless of whether the services provided ended up being cost neutral. Even without considering the danger that this bill will impose on women's health providers and women, the definition of taxpayer resource transaction makes this a fiscally irresponsible policy, despite the author's intention that this be supposedly a taxpayer protection bill. It's sacrificing women and their health to achieve a political agenda by shutting down Planned Parenthood. We just have to go back and look at historically, for those of you who weren't here, and many of you were not, some of us were, the 2011 budget cuts that were made and the elimination of Planned Parenthood as a qualified provider resulted in a two-third cut in the family planning budget, a loss of $30 million in federal dollars because Planned Parenthood was no longer allowed to participate in the women's health program, and the federal dollars were lost and were replaced with state dollars. State Texas dollars were used and are still being used because we don't get those federal dollars anymore. At that time, we ended up losing 50 clinics were shut down. 147,000 Texas women lost services. These are real people we're talking about here. And ever since then, the state's been scrapping together sources of funding for women's health in an effort to rebuild the state's network. But it has not been enough. It's 2019, and we're still not rebuilding a program that we decimated. Our state's alternative since then has been to create its own programs with important yet limited services to replace the degraded network of providers. And all credit to Chair Davis for funding women's health with caseload and cost growth in mind, but it's important to note that we're only able to do that by budgeting dollars that we have not yet received, and we're still only seeing about a quarter of those eligible women in our state. The state's not close to achieving the reconstruction of its network of women's health services in order to meet that need. The fiscal year 18 Healthy Texas Women report from HHSC found that of the 29,363 enrolled providers, only 3,085 of those 29,363 actually billed for services in the program, and only 2,161 of those are primary providers. My point being, we've got this long list of providers, but most of them are not even seeing women. In the fiscal year 17, only 9 of the Healthy Texas Women contractors met their proposed clients out of 39 contractors. Most of the contractors who did not meet their client counts missed it by wide margins. You've already heard about the Heidi Group. They proposed they were going to see 50,610 women, and they only served 2,327. This is when we have increasing need for capacity. We're not meeting the need. So here we go again, cutting off another funding stream for women's health. It's also, I believe, an attack on our cities and counties and other local entities who are trying to serve the women in their communities, trying to meet the needs of the health care of women in our communities. If the concern of this bill is truly on the use of local taxpayer dollars by certain women's health providers, then this should be an acceptable amendment, since it ensures that women's health services can be provided by these providers if the services are cost neutral. It's quite concerning, unfortunately, to me, that this is a compromise amendment. And it basically says that women can only receive essential health services if there are no costs. I guess we're all just kind of really tired of this. The fact is, these are real women's lives. To make political statements, we're sacrificing the health care of over 5,000 women that go to the clinic here in Austin. I don't know about the other clinics that are being affected. These are women who are getting services right now. We don't even have enough to provide what they need right now. And we're going to say, I'm sorry, you can't do this. You can't get the health care that you need. We don't like Planned Parenthood. So even though this doesn't have anything to do with abortion, even though not a penny of tax dollar goes to abortion, even though this is meeting the needs of women in this community and communities across this state, to allow them to be healthy, to allow them, a lot of them already have children, to make sure that they can take care of the children they have and not have more that they can't afford to have. And we're going to say, because we have Planned Parenthood who is actually providing a panoply of health services that are sought and legal by women in this state, because that happens to exist, we're going to cut off your ability to get the funding you need to offer your program. I'm totally blown away by this, colleagues, that we continue to do this. Make your statements. Let's have the debate somehow else about abortion. Right now, though, it is legal. It is something that if a woman wants to have it, she should have access to. And just because that's the case, you're going to throw these other women under the bus to make this statement. How can we justify that as a morally higher ground? I do not get that. Sacrificing women's health care somehow justifies what you consider to be more morally superior to people like me who believe that women should have access to health care. I don't get it. So this amendment would just make sure that if a facility like we have here in East Austin can show that it's cost neutral, they're not getting any benefit, and believe me, they really aren't anyway, but if they can show that, then that should be acceptable, and that's a fiscally responsible thing to do, and this is supposed to be a fiscal responsibility bill. So with that, I move adoption.
Chair recognizes Ms.